Hello, everybody. My name is Yaman, and I provide daily updates on Tesla, markets, and technology. Let's get started. Markets are higher today. Nasdaq is up 1%. S&P 500 is up 0.7%. Russell 2000 is down slightly. Crude oil is at $65 per barrel, pretty much unchanged, and yield curve is up a few basis points today. Interesting. Heat map shows Apple up 6%, Broadcom up 2%, AMD down 7% after announcing earnings. Amazon up 2.5%, Tesla is up 3%. Healthcare is down across the board. Financials are up across the board. We have a couple of news over there. Walmart is up 4%, Costco is up 2.5%. Wall Street boosted by earnings, Fed rate cut hopes. Wall Street gained on Wednesday, boosted by a string of largely upbeat corporate earnings. Give me 1 second. While rising expectations of a Federal Reserve interest rate cut provided additional support. Artisan Networks was a standout, soaring 17.5% to an all-time high after the cloud networking company projected current quarter revenue above estimates. McDonald's was up 3% higher after the fast food giant's affordable menu drove global sales past expectations. Global payments also advanced 5% after topping second quarter profit forecasts, while Match Group, the parent of Tinder, jumped 14% after surpassing revenue expectations for the same quarter. Apple jumped 5%, providing the biggest boost to the S&P 500 index, as a White House official said the company would announce a $100 billion domestic manufacturing pledge. The stock was on track for its biggest single-day jump in nearly 3 months. In contrast, AMD tumbled 8% as its data center chip revenue disappointed. Supermicro Computer plunged 21% after missing fourth quarter sales estimates, dragging rival Dell down 2.4%. Walt Disney delivered a strong quarter and lifted its full-year outlook, but its shares slipped 3%. Airbnb, DoorDash, and Lyft will report their results after the market closes. Earnings are seeing a mixed reaction, particularly for a few of the AI names. Expectations were just extremely high, but by and large, the earnings in aggregate have been good enough to keep a floor under the market, said Ross Mayfield, investment strategy analyst at Baird. Markets also found support in rising bets for a September rate cut after last week's jobs report showed slowing employment growth and downward revisions for previous months, suggesting a weakening labor market and lifting expectations of a Fed action to boost the economy. Odds for the next month's cut stand at 93.2% compared with just 46.7% last week, according to a CME Group's FedWatch tool. Traders also bet on at least 2 cuts by the end of 2025. Tuesday's data showed U.S. services sector activity unexpectedly stalled in July, highlighting U.S. President Trump's tariff-related strain on businesses. We talked about that data quite extensively in yesterday's episode. I also published it separately as a video on my YouTube channel. Trump's tariff threats showed no signs of easing as he issued an executive order imposing an additional 25% tariff on goods from India due to the country's Russian oil imports. Adding to the uncertainty, Trump will decide on a nominee to replace outgoing Fed Governor Adriana Kugler by the end of the week, while saying he has narrowed the possible replacements for Fed Chair Jerome Powell to a short list of 4. Meanwhile, the Fed's Neil Kashkari said on CNBC that the central bank needs to act to a slowing economy, but warned that a rise in inflation, possibly triggered by tariffs, could prompt the Fed to hit pause or even consider a hike. That's not going to happen. A hike isn't going to happen. But I think they might actually pause, despite the massive bets that they will cut. Most people think that they will cut. But I think it's still not a done deal. There's a lot of data to come out in the next few weeks. Trump announces plans for additional 25% tariffs on India as he turns up the pressure on Russia to find truce. The White House on Wednesday announced an additional 25% tariff on India over the nation's purchase of Russian oil, making good on a promise to substantially increase duties to the world's 4th largest economy. But these additional tariffs come with a 3-week delay, likely giving time for additional negotiations as Trump is simultaneously trying to directly pressure Russian President Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire as soon as this week to stop the fighting in Ukraine. The announcement came in a new executive order that focused on India. The president is implementing these additional tariffs in part by invoking the authority in the 1977 International Emergency Economic Power Act, which is currently being challenged in the courts. Quote, I determine that it is necessary and appropriate to impose an additional ad valorem duty on imports of articles of India, which is directly or indirectly importing Russian Federation oil, Anchor reads the order. The duties will be in addition to any other duties, the text adds, meaning that India is facing the possibility of a whopping 50% duties when today's announcement is combined with 25% reciprocal duties set to go into effect at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on Thursday morning. But the text of the order released Wednesday delays these additional 25% duties for 21 days. There is even a further delay, as in other recent announcements, for goods loaded onto boats by the expiration of the 21-day deadline, with these new tariffs set to fully take effect at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on September 17 at U.S. airports, U.S. ports. This is really interesting because um, these tariffs are kicking in stages over several months. So to the extent that people are looking at average tariff rates in Q2 or July, I think it's still premature to think that we know the full effect of these tariffs. I think it's going to take several quarters, as I've been saying. The India focus announcement on Wednesday also came as U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff met with Putin in Moscow for talks there ahead of a Friday deadline that Trump had previously set for Russia to agree to a truce or face potential sanctions itself. White House officials have talked in recent days about how part of their strategy is to put potential pain on Russia's allies, who they hope will then pressure Putin and Russia itself. Other major consumers of Russian oil, notably China, were not mentioned on Wednesday, but the order does include a note that Trump's team shall determine whether any other country is directly or indirectly importing Russian Federation oil. More Trump news. Trump tariffs live updates. Trump hits India with additional 25% tariff as world braces for sweeping duties. President Trump on Wednesday signed an executive order imposing additional 25% tariff on India for purchasing Russian oil. The new tariff, which will come into effect in 21 days, is set to stack on top of the existing country's specific tariff of 25%. Let's skip that part. Meanwhile, China is pushing back against the US on chips despite a temporary trade and tariff truce, according to a Bloomberg report on Wednesday. Beijing summoned NVIDIA's staff last week over alleged security risks in its H20 chips, using the move to push back against Washington's plans to track semiconductors. Trump on Tuesday said he would announce tariffs on semiconductors and pharmaceutical imports within the next week or so, as he prepares to add more sectoral duties to his mix of tariffs. He said those duties could eventually balloon as high as 250%. Trump has signed an order to hike tariffs on Canada to 35%, while setting rates from 10% to 40% on dozens of partners. Those duties are set to come into full effect this week. In the past several days, Trump has unleashed a flurry of deals and trade moves leading up to his self-imposed deadline. Trump granted Mexico, the U.S. largest trading partner, a 90-day reprieve on higher tariffs. The U.S. agreed to a trade deal with South Korea. The agreement includes a 15% tariff rate on imports from the country, while the U.S. will not be charged a tariff on its exports, Trump said. Trump imposed 50% tariffs on semi-finished copper products starting August 1. The president signed an order to end de minimis exemption on low-value imports under $800, thereby applying tariffs from August 29. Trump signed another order to impose a total of 50% tariffs on many goods from Brazil, however, it exempts key U.S. imports like orange juice and aircraft parts that benefit Embraer. The U.S. and EU agreed to a deal that imposes 15% tariffs on EU goods. The nations are still working on finalizing many terms of the deal. So my understanding, I mean, look at these dates, like August 29. India has an extension 21 days to take effect. So these things are going to kick in throughout September, and many companies brought in many months of inventories ahead of these tariffs. So we're going to see the impact of these tariffs on inflation reports, on prices, in the coming quarters. So it's going to take a long, long time to see the full effect. We're just starting to see the effect. And next week, we're going to get CPI and PPI reports. And I think it's going to be important to kind of look at it down to the detail, which we will do on Tesla Live. I need to come up with a different name. White House prepares order targeting banks as Trump claims discrimination. The White House was preparing to act against banks for allegedly dropping customers for political reasons, as President Donald Trump said he believes that banks, including JP Morgan and Bank of America, had discriminated against him and his supporters. A draft of the executive order, which was reviewed by Reuters, instructs regulators to review banks for politicized or unlawful debanking practices. The order could authorize monetary penalties or other disciplinary measures against violators. It's likely to be announced as early as this week, two sources said. The White House had no immediate comment on the reported order. Interesting. Let's look at the details of this announcement by Apple. It's going to come at the end of today, apparently. $100 billion in investment in U.S. manufacturing commitments. Okay. The move follows Apple's prior $500 billion investment in U.S. spending, which includes working with partners to build an AI server plant in Texas. Apple's news comes after the Trump administration began pressuring the tech giant for manufacture its iPhone in the U.S., going so far as to threaten to impose a 25% tariff on the devices if the company didn't comply. Apple's announcement also comes as the company prepares for a new 25% tariff on goods destined for the US from India. That's in addition to an existing 25% levy Trump previously said he would apply to the country's products. Apple builds the majority of the iPhones headed to the US in India after diversifying its supply chain beyond China following the COVID-19 pandemic. The company still produces iPhones for the rest of the world in China. Trump has repeatedly criticized Apple for building its iPhones abroad, with the administration saying the company should instead bring its manufacturing facilities to the US. In May, Trump said he had little problem with Tim Cook while discussing the company's decision to build US iPhones in India. But industry experts say doing so would be a Herculean task even for Apple due to a lack of available skilled workers and limited supply chain resources in the country. Even if those factors weren't an issue, it would take years to complete construction of an iPhone plant, at which point Trump would no longer be in office. During its most recent quarterly earnings report, Apple said it took an $800 million hit due to existing tariffs and anticipating an additional $1.1 billion in related costs in its current quarter. I think it makes sense to have manufacturing capacity in each major region. Uber in talks with banks, private equity firms to fund robotaxi expansion. We're going to read that later. Let me continue with Trump news first. Trump advisors push for a temporary Fed governor to fill open seat. Donald Trump's advisors are encouraging him to nominate a temporary Federal Reserve governor to fill the soon-to-be vacant seat on the central bank's board, according to people familiar with the discussions. Naming a governor to serve out the term for the seat opening soon, set to expire in January 2026, would give Trump additional time to interview candidates to serve as chair when Powell's tenure leading the central bank ends in May of the next year, people said. Fed Governor Adriana Kugler announced last week that she plans to vacate her role on August 8th. A short-term governor is likely to be someone who's already in the government and who has previously been confirmed by the Senate for a federal job, two people said. The nominee will need to clear Senate confirmation, a vetting process that has traditionally taken months, but could be expedited if Trump pressures lawmakers to quickly fill the seat. Trump is slated to meet with advisors on Wednesday about the Fed pick, one person said. Trump on Tuesday said he would make his decision for a replacement for Kugler this week as he looks to make his imprint on the central bank. No decision should be deemed final until announced by Trump, a White House official said. Trump on Tuesday said he's weighing whether to fill the seat with a short-term pick or someone who would likely elevate to Fed chair next year. will either decide on one for permanence or 4-month period, the term. There's a term about a number of months, Trump told reporters at White House event on Tuesday. Kugler's early departure hands Trump a sooner than anticipated opportunity to fill the Fed board with a governor who more closely aligns with his preference for lower interest rates. Trump has been highly critical of the Fed, repeatedly blaming the central bank and Powell for being too slow to lower interest rates. Trump has argued the central bank, which has so far left rates unchanged in 2025, is keeping the federal government's debt servicing costs too high and restraining economic growth. But the addition of a dovish governor to the FOMC, which sets policy, is unlikely to yield an immediate shift. The FOMC is composed of 7 members of the Board of Governors based in Washington and 5 of the Fed's regional reserve bank presidents. A majority vote is required to adjust rates. Among the broader group of 19 policymakers who participate in FOMC meetings, a majority signaled in June that they expect 2 rate cuts this year, a projection that makes a move in September a strong possibility. Yeah, I think it's unlikely that Trump is going to get someone in there by the September meeting, but we'll see. Infrastructure fund pays $1 billion to acquire largest U.S. regional railroad. This was no, I'm going to skip this one. All right. Uber in talks with banks, private equity firms to fund robotaxi expansion. Uber is in talks with private equity firms and banks to secure funds to build its robotaxi business, CEO Dara said, as the ride-hailing giant bets on a mass rollout of the nascent and much scrutinized technology. The company has been offering robotaxis from Alphabet-owned Waymo on its ride-hailing app in Austin and Atlanta. It also struck a $300 million partnership in July that will allow it to deploy more than 20,000 vehicles made by electric vehicle firm Lucid and powered by self-driving tech from Nuro over 6 years. CEO on Wednesday pitched the tie-ups as part of a larger plan that involves 3 robotaxi business models: paying partners that own such vehicles at a fixed rate, sharing revenue with fleet operators, and owning vehicles while licensing software for self-driving technology. We are talking to private equity players. We have talked to banks, the CEO said. Once we prove the revenue model, how much these cars can generate on a per-day basis, there will be plenty of financing to go around. For now, Uber said it was planning on using a modest portion of its around $7 billion in annual cash inflows to fund deployments. It might also sell minority stakes in companies to aid the expansion, it said. Analysts have said that mass robotaxi deployment could lower driver-reliant Uber's operating costs and boost profitability. Despite strong regulatory scrutiny and doubts about wider adoption, several companies, including Tesla and U.S. market leader Waymo, have been rushing to roll out robotaxis, a business Elon Musk has said could be worth trillions of dollars. Elon says a lot of things. Waymo is present in 5 U.S. cities, including San Francisco, while Tesla launched a robotaxi service in Austin in June and started ride-hailing operation in the Bay Area last month. Uber said it has not yet seen any changes in demand trends in Austin or San Francisco since Tesla's robotaxi service has launched in the cities. To a lot of these companies, it does seem this will be a worthwhile endeavor, as there are lofty predictions about the robotaxi industry's total addressable market, said Ken Mahoney, CEO of Mahoney Asset Management. Tesla is also starting to hint at FSD 14. Elon tweeted today that Tesla is training a new FSD model with 10 extra parameters and a big improvement to video compression loss. Probably ready for public release end of next month if testing goes well. Not going to happen. I think FSD 14 is going to roll out slowly to the influencers on X so that they can hype it and pump it by the end of this year, maybe around Thanksgiving, and then general public by early next year. And I think that it will complete maybe close to 99% of trips without a critical disengagement, well short of the 99.9999% accuracy necessary for nationwide adoption of Tesla's robotaxi service. I think that's still 5-10 years out, if not longer. And you can see here how FSD 13 performance have evolved in the last 8 months. As more and more users were added, as more miles were logged in, the it kind of failed to reach the 98% accuracy that I was predicting. So as of last week, it's at 96.8, 97%. So I kind of feel like FSD progress is slowing down a little bit. I think Tesla is having difficulty cracking the code on critical disengagements. But I guess we'll see when FSD 14 comes out. I already put out my prediction. I think it's going to be less than 99% accuracy, and I will track it throughout the next year as it rolls out. On that note, thank you very much, everybody, and I will chat with you all next time. Take care.